Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a fascinating moment in history, the Battle of Konotop, which took place on June 29, 1659, near the town of Konotop in what's now Ukraine. This battle was a major clash during the Russo-Polish War, a conflict that ran from 1654 to 1667, pitting the Tsardom of Russia against a coalition led by Ivan Vyhovsky, the hetman of the Ukrainian Cossacks. Vyhovsky's side included not just his Cossack forces, but also allies like the Crimean Tatars and Polish troops. It's a story packed with strategy, resilience, and some serious political fallout. So let's break it down step by step. First, let's set the stage. The Battle of Konotop happened during a chaotic period in Ukrainian history known as the Ruin. This was a time after the death of the legendary hetman Bohdan Khmelnytsky in 1657, when Ukraine was caught in a whirlwind of internal power struggles and external pressures. Khmelnytsky had been a powerhouse. Under his leadership, the Cossacks had thrown off Polish rule during the uprising that started in 1648, creating a semi-independent Cossack state called the Hetmanate. But in 1654, facing mounting challenges, he signed the Treaty of Pereyaslav with Russia, tying Ukraine to Moscow in an uneasy alliance. When Khmelnytsky passed away, his successor, Ivan Vyhovsky, stepped into a mess. Moscow was meddling more and more in Ukrainian affairs, and some Cossack factions were even stirring up trouble against Vyhovsky, possibly with Russian encouragement. It was a tense situation, and Vyhovsky wasn't about to let it slide. Now, let's zoom in on early 1659. Russia decided to flex its muscle and sent a big army toward Ukraine, led by Prince Alexei Trubetskoy. Estimates on the size of this force vary. Official Russian records from the Razryadny Prikaz say it was about 28,600 men, but some chronicles, like the Chronicle of the Witness and historian Sergei Solovyov, claim it could have been as high as 100,000 to 150,000. Modern historians tend to think those bigger numbers are exaggerated, so we'll stick with the more conservative figure for now. Either way, it was a serious army, and Trubetskoy had a clear goal: crush Vyhovsky's resistance and tighten Moscow's grip on Ukraine. The Russians crossed the border on January 30th, 1659, and for about 40 days, they camped out, trying to negotiate with Vyhovsky. Trubetskoy had orders to win over the Cossacks peacefully if he could, but Vyhovsky wasn't budging. Meanwhile, some of Vyhovsky's rivals, like Cossack commanders Bezpalii, Voronko, and Barabash from the Zaporizhian Cossacks, threw their lot in with the Russians, making things even trickier for the hetman. When talks broke down, Trubetskoy shifted gears and targeted the city of Konotop, a fortified spot defended by a small Cossack garrison of about 4,000 men under Colonel Hryry Helianitsky. Here's where things get intense. Trubetskoy figured he could take Konotop quickly and move on, but Helianitsky and his crew had other plans. On April 21st, 1659, after a morning prayer, Trubetskoy launched a full-on assault. The Russians bombarded the city with incendiary shells and stormed the walls. At one point, they even breached the defenses, but the Cossacks fought back hard and pushed them out. After that failed attack, Trubetskoy switched to a siege strategy. He ordered his troops to shell the city and fill the defensive moat with earth, hoping to wear down the defenders. But the Cossacks were clever. Every night, they'd sneak out, take the dirt the Russians had piled up, and use it to reinforce their own walls. Talk about turning the tables. The Cossacks didn't just sit tight, either. They launched several counterattacks on Trubetskoy's forces, hitting them hard enough that the Russian commander had to pull his main camp back 10 kilometers from the city. This split his army in two, one group keeping up the siege, the other at his headquarters. On April 29th, another Cossack raid struck, and the Russians took a beating, losing nearly 400 men and seeing around 3,000 wounded. What was supposed to be a quick victory dragged on for 70 days, and that gave Vyhovsky the time he needed to get ready for the big showdown. While Konotop held out, Vyhovsky was busy pulling together his coalition. He secured a major ally in the Crimean Tatars, led by Khan Mehmed Forjuri, who brought around 30,000 fighters into the mix. He also got support from Poland, about 4,000 troops, including some Serbian, Moldovan, and German mercenaries. By late June, Vyhovsky was ready to move. On June 24th, his forces clashed with a small Russian scouting party near the village of Shapovalivka, southeast of Konotop, and wiped them out. Then, he set up his battle plan. The Tatars positioned themselves on the left bank of the Sosnivka River, while Vyhovsky's Cossacks, along with the Poles and mercenaries, took the village of Sosnivka to the south. Vyhovsky handed command of the main army to Stepan Hulianitsky, Priory's brother, and took a smaller Cossack unit to approach Konotop himself. The big battle kicked off on June 29, 1659. Vyhovsky's strategy was sharp. He used his smaller force to lure the Russian cavalry into a trap. As the Russians chased them across the Sosnivka River, the Tatars sprang an ambush from the bushes, cutting them down. Meanwhile, Vyhovsky's main army hit Trubetskoy's forces head-on near Sosnivka. The Russians were caught off guard, and the coalition's combined might, especially the Tatars' lightning-fast cavalry, overwhelmed them. Trubetskoy's army took heavy losses, and he had no choice but to break off the siege of Konotop and retreat. It was a stunning win for Vyhovsky, but the victory came with a catch. Here's the twist. Winning the battle didn't solve Vyhovsky's problems, it made them worse. See, his alliance with the Poles and Tatars didn't sit well with a lot of Ukrainians. The Poles were old enemies from the days of Khmelnytsky's uprising, and the Tatars had a reputation for raiding Ukrainian lands. Right after the battle, cities like Lakhvitsia, Hadiak, Poltava, and Romny rebelled against Vyhovsky. Just 2 months later, the people of Nizhyn welcomed Trubetskoy with open arms and swore loyalty to the Russian Tsar. That same month, Cossack regiments in Kiev, Pereyaslav, and Chernihiv did the same. Vyhovsky's support was crumbling fast. By the end of 1659, the pressure was too much. Vyhovsky resigned as hetman and fled to Poland, where things didn't end well for him. He was executed by the Poles in 1664 after getting tangled up in their politics. Historians point to a couple of reasons for his downfall. His reliance on unpopular allies like the Poles alienated the broader Ukrainian population, and he struggled to win over anyone beyond the wealthy Cossack elite, who were quick to switch sides when it suited them. The civil war kept raging, and the triumph at Konotop faded into the background. So, what's the bigger picture here? The Battle of Konotop is a bit of a paradox. On one hand, it showed off the skill and grit of the Cossacks, especially those who held Konotop against all odds, and it poked holes in Russian claims about some unbreakable bond between Ukrainians and Russians. That's why it still resonates today, especially in Ukraine, where it's seen as a symbol of resistance. Poets like Yaroslavudik, Alina Teleha, and P. Karpenko Kranitsia wrote odes about it, and Kobzars, those wandering Ukrainian minstrels, kept the story alive in their songs. But on the other hand, it didn't change the course of history. The ruin dragged on, fueled by infighting and outside interference, and Ukraine stayed caught between powers like Russia and Poland for years to come. Let's dig a little deeper into the context. The Russo-Polish War itself was a messy affair, sparked by the power vacuum after Khmelnytsky's uprising. Russia saw a chance to expand its influence, while Poland was trying to claw back control. Vyhovsky actually started out pro-Polish. He'd signed the Treaty of Hadiak in 1658, aiming to bring Ukraine into a commonwealth with Poland and Lithuania as an equal partner. But that deal never really took off, partly because of resistance from rank-and-file Cossacks who hated the idea of Polish rule creeping back in. Konotop was Vyhovsky's big push to prove he could stand up to Russia, but it ended up costing him more than it gained. For Russia, the loss at Konotop was a blow, but not a knockout. Trubetskoy's army was battered, but Moscow kept up the pressure on Ukraine. The Tsardom had deeper resources and played the long game, backing Vyhovsky's rivals and waiting out the chaos. Over time, Russia's influence grew, especially after the Treaty of Andrusovo. In 1667 split Ukraine between Russia and Poland along the Dnieper River. Konotop might have been a tactical win for Vyhovsky, but strategically, it didn't shift the balance. What about the people who fought? The Cossacks were the heart of this story, fierce, independent warriors who'd been shaping Ukraine's fate since the 15th century. They were masters of guerrilla tactics and cavalry charges, and at Konotop, they showed what they could do with the right leadership. The Crimean Tatars, too, were key players, nomadic horsemen who'd been allies and enemies to both Ukraine and Russia over the years. Their role in the ambush was a game-changer, proving how crucial alliances were in this fractured region. Today, Konotop's legacy lives on in different ways. In Ukraine, it's a point of pride, a reminder of a time when the Cossacks stood tall against a bigger foe. There's even a monument near the battlefield, and historians still debate its impact. Some, like S. Makun, call it a bitter victory, brilliant in the moment, but overshadowed by the turmoil that followed. For Russia, it's a footnote in a broader narrative of expansion. Either way, it's a window into a wild chapter of Eastern European history, where loyalty was fluid, and every win came with a cost. Alright, that's the Battle of Konotop in a nutshell, or maybe a big, detailed shell. If you enjoyed this dive into the past, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think. Did Vyhovsky make the right call with his alliances, or was he doomed from the start? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.